My name is Yvette Vanterpool. I was born and raised in East Harlem, in New York City, and I joke around all the time and tell people that it's true that I'm a native New Yorker, but one of the biggest jokes is that there's a lot of people in New York who are not native New Yorkers, so I own that with distinction. And I'm a twin, and so I am the extroverted half of the twin. And I think that I have always been a connector as a person. I've always been the chattier one, the one who's more willing to be engaged. When I think about where I am now and how I got to where I am, it's been a really interesting path. I always was a very dramatic child. I sang, I danced, I acted. My mother knew immediately, let me get her in some activities. And so from an early age, I knew that I was going to be a performer. As a performer, I used to say to people that everything that I did prepared me to be an opera singer. And I had a loud voice. It was not a voice that just blended in with the choir, even as a child. That was the case. I started taking French when I was in third grade. And I used to say that my name was Yvette Suzette Vanterpool. Make it sound as French as possible because I wanted to be French. And so I also had an affinity for languages. I also have a master's degree in music. And that was sort of allowed a time for my voice to sort of grow up a little bit more. And then I was really fortunate. I got to sing with the Boston Symphony Orchestra and Houston Grand Opera and Texas Opera Theater. And I always felt at home on the stage. I got to sing wonderful roles. I sang Butterfly, I sang Mimi. There's along the way, one of the other things that I always did was event planning. And it was great that I was with a group of people. I worked with a group of people who, as performers, we supported each other,
How did you connect with that support?
How did I connect with that support group? Through another friend who was a singer. And so it also gave me a background in finance, and understanding some things about money and investments and that kind of thing. And then, one of the things that I recognize is that a lot of the times when I didn't know what the next step was going to be, I would say that I have always been a person who prays. And I can remember being in undergraduate school, and I was taking 21 and a half credits. And my mother told me about a phone number that I could call where the person would pray with me on the other side of the line. And I found that to be extremely useful because there were just times when I felt very stressed out by the demands of, what I was studying. And that is something, that prayer thread is something that helped me even in my singing. I was always nervous when I would do an audition. And I developed a prayer that I would say before auditions and that I would say before every performance. And I still say it now. And that prayer is, with God as my partner, every endeavor is a success. That was the prayer that I said before I would walk out on the stage. And it helped me to realize that, number one, that God is my partner, reinforce that, but that I'm not performing by myself. I'm not, anything that I'm doing, I'm not doing it by myself. And that is still a prayer that the other day I went to write a speech that I was really nervous about. And I just said, okay, with God as my partner, every endeavor is a success. I think the other thing that has helped me a lot is that we all have that voice within us that tells us we can't do certain things. So my inner voice's name was Elaine. And so whenever Elaine's voice would start to say, no, you can't do that, or you're not in good voice today, you know, I would just say, you know, Elaine, I know you're trying to be helpful, but I don't need you right now, or I've got this under control. And that's another thing that I have to tell you has stood me in good stead. It seems like a silly exercise, but that voice can be very loud in our head. And I think that prayer is very important. I have a saying, actively pray, but prayerfully act. So it's not enough just to pray. You know, you got to give God something to work with. I can remember being fired from a job and thinking, and just being beside myself, literally beside myself. But it also freed me up to explore some other jobs that I wouldn't necessarily have explored. So I think that those are really important things for young women to keep in mind as they're developing a sense of their formation as a person and what they want to do. Several friends even made me aware that, you know, even when I was 21 and 22, they would call me and say, oh, Yvette, I'm upset about something, and I would say, well, let's meditate, you know, let's get centered, let's quiet, you know. And so I realized that prayer has always been important to me. And what I've learned is that you cannot pray with people on a regular basis and not be changed. Prayer, when I'm praying with people, there is, yes, I'm aware on one level of what I'm saying, but there's another way in which God is using me and guiding me and, you know, guiding my words and my sense of what to say. And so as a result of praying with people over and over through some very difficult situations and circumstances, slowly but surely I realized that out of that, my call grew out of that. And initially, I will tell you that I wasn't very happy about that. I remember saying to God, I'm an opera singer. Why are you bothering me? Why are you disturbing me? Okay? I think the hardest thing to understand is that identity is something that is very fluid. And we wear more than one hat throughout our lives. And so, but it also felt, as upsetting as it was, it felt right. I also, not only did it feel right, I didn't feel like I had the choice to do anything else. Just like at one time, I felt like the only thing that singing, I couldn't imagine myself not singing. I could not imagine myself responding to God's call. There are times when I wasn't sure if this was the right step, but there was enough that was right about it that led me to recognize, okay, you can take those next 2 steps or those 3 steps and then trust that you'll find out, you know, where you're supposed to be as you keep going. You know, one of my mentors used to say to me that if God showed you the entire picture of where God is going to take you, you would be paralyzed and not even move. And that is so true. That is so very true. And so, you know, for those times when I'm leading worship or when I'm preaching, there are times when I say to myself, who would have thought that I would have been here? You know, this is the same person who sang Madam Butterfly 15 years ago or 20 years ago.